Good evening. If everyone is ready, I'll go ahead and start the budget work session presentation. Is that too loud or am I good? Okay. All right. So I'll start with the slideshow presentation, and I gave everyone a copy of that. The first is a summary of what the budget from 21-22, the current year we're in, as comparison to the budget for 22-23. So revenues, which had been $87,624,000 in the current year, we actually have a decrease of $2,274,000 to $85,350,000 in revenue, and expenditures going from $81,021,000 to $82,895,000, which is an increase of $1.8 million. That's a 2.3% increase in expenditures and a 2.6% decrease in revenues. Primarily, the decrease in revenues is COVID funding related. We had budgeted more revenue with grant money for COVID in the current year than we will, and I'll show you that in a slide later in the presentation. So what makes up the $85 million of our revenue is state funding of 62%, which is $52,887,000, and federal funding of 13%, which is $10,864,000, and local funding of 25%, which is $21,592,000. In a typical year pre-COVID, without COVID funding, federal money would not be 13%. It is usually around 6%, making the state funding obviously a higher number. But we have a lot more federal money in our budget because of COVID revenues that we'll receive. So what makes up our expenditure budget of $82,895,058? So salaries make up 36% and benefits 24%, meaning that our salaries and benefits are 60% of the total budget, very large portion of our total budget. Purchases services makes up 24% of the budget. And if you're not sure, purchase services, a lot of that is transportation as well as tuition. And then financing sources, which is our debt service for bond payments, makes up 11% of the budget. And then supplies and equipment only make up 5% of our budget. So one of the large areas of our budget is special education, where we've seen a lot of increases over the past years. So I wanted to touch base on that as to the reasons and what makes up these additional costs. So you can see that from 2021 to 21-22, there's quite a significant difference. It's almost $2 million increase in that budget. We had an increase of $1 million for tuitions for students placed in special education placements. In 2021, that actually had been under budget, and we actually were over budget in that, so we had to increase the budget. So, we also, in that line item, we have an additional $500,000 for counseling services, which is most of it is Chestnut Ridge counseling services. And also we pay for private nursing services for students who require an individual one-on-one nurse. And with some of the counseling, the Chestnut Ridge, the additional counselors are going to be paid from COVID funds. However, it's still a special ed cost, so while spent with COVID money, it will be spent with COVID money. Also, over the past 2 years, we've had several increases in staffing in special ed, both in teachers and paraprofessionals, and that resulted in about $500,000 in increased costs over the 2 years. Another large item of the budget is our Slacker charter school tuition cost. This is the budget for the outside cyber, not our own cyber. So you can see I did a 10-year history, and you can see that we had a large increase until 15-16, and in 16-17 a large decrease. So that was when we moved to FOLA, Falcon Online Learning Academy, and we spent some time recruiting, trying to get students to come back into our district to save the money. But as you can see over time, it has slowly crept up. And we have a lot of students in our own cyber, but we also still have a large sum of students that are going to outside cyber schools. I think some of this may be due to the last 3 years of the time with the pandemic, a lot of students going to cyber and wanting to learn online. But we need to try to address and try to see if we can't bring our students back in-house or bring them back to our online cyber school. So the next is a summary of COVID-related grants. So a lot of board members, they had questions about, what are we spending extra on, how much we've actually gotten. So I did a breakdown of, all of the ESSER grants. And so you can see what has been spent, what's been budgeted. So if you look at ESSER 1 is the top one. We had $1.8 million in which was spent in the 2021 year for maintaining our existing staffing and some salaries. ESSER 2, it's a $7,566,119. We had budgeted to spend, this is all to be spent on maintaining existing staffing and salaries and benefits. We budget primarily to spend it most of this year, but however, with the estimates of what we're doing, we're approximately $5.9 million is going to be spent. And so we will have a little bit of carryover to the school year of $1,658,000 for next school year on that. And then we have our large one, our ARP ESSER. So the ARP ESSER, we're getting $15,304,069. 80% of that can be spent how we wish and on a lot of different items. And one of the main budgeted items is to, again, maintain staffing, salaries, and benefits. However, the other 20% has to be spent on learning loss of that, and it's very specific. Tracy has worked very hard on the budget for this and trying to find programs. So we have budgeted, we've spent this year, or estimated to spend by the end of the year, about $4,347,000 in salaries and benefits, and a little bit of that might have been, we haven't spent any of the learning loss as of yet. We're going to spend that this summer. So we split the remainder of that budget over the next 2 years, because we have until September of 2024 to spend this money. So we'll have a little over $5 million in 22-23, and then also again in 23-24 to spend that money. And then ARP ESSER has several set-aside grants, so this is additional ARP ESSER funding. We have the learning lots set aside, which we've spent a little bit this year. However, it's $849,000. We're going to split the remainder of that over the next 2 years, 22, 23, and 23, 24. Then there's the summer school set aside. And we did last summer with the extended school year in elementary summer school, we did spend $91,000 on transportation for that, to bring our kids and get as many students the help that they needed last summer. And so the plan is to spend the remainder of that one on transportation for the same extended school year and summer school for this summer. The ARP ESSER after school tutoring set aside, we spent about $10,800 on that so far this year, and the remainder of that, $169,000, will be spent over the next few years. And then finally, we have an ARP ESSER ATS set aside. And that is $193,409, and we're going to spend that, we're budgeting to spend that equally over the next 2 years. So total of the ESSER amount of the budget is $7.8 million. Of that, $6,684,000 is going to be spent on salaries and benefits, or budgeted to be spent. We keep talking about the effect of COVID and the COVID money that we've, receiving, which has been a great benefit to the Connellsville School District. However, we're using it to try to balance our budget when maintaining staffing. Eventually, that money is going to run out, and so this is a projection of the next 5 years. Well, sorry, it's the current year plus a projection of the next 4 years. So you can see that this current year, $87 million was the budget of expenditures, but if you take out the $13.8 million that was budgeted that was COVID money, that leaves you as a revenue of $73,819,000. In the expenditure side, you have $81 million of budget expenditures. If you take out, we didn't spend that money on salary, so that leaves you $80,694,000. So while we did budget a surplus budget overall, counting COVID money, without that, we would have been $6.8 million deficit. But hopefully we're going to receive the money. We hopefully will add to our fund balance. And then that brings us to next year. We're going to have the same problem. You can see that with COVID money included, I'm looking at a surplus budget of $2.4 million. However, if we had no COVID money in that, we would have been a deficit budget of $4.6 million for the year. So we keep taking this forward, and I've estimated it with an average of 2% increase on expenditures. Eventually, come 24-25, we will no longer have any COVID expenditures, COVID revenue. And eventually, you see, we will start to take from our fund balance and deplete it if we don't address, by, I think, a combination of both property tax increases and trying to find ways to cut in our budget as we can through, attrition, through maybe programs. So it's something that those are going to be the hard talks that we want to have over the course of the next couple of years. So continue talking, this is about the fund balance. This is a 15-year of fund balance, both prior years and then a few years into the future projection, using that spreadsheet that I just had for you. The darker blue line is the total fund balance, where the lighter blue line is the unreserved fund balance. You shouldn't have an unreserved fund balance of more than 8% of your budget. So, there's lots of ways to reserve your fund balance. You can reserve your fund balance for future PSERS costs, future salary increases and benefits increases. So, but you can see where that blue line, dark blue line, is going to eventually decline and eventually we're going to be dropping our fund balance if we don't make some changes. Sorry to bear with that maybe sometimes. So that being said, one of the ways that you can help our situation is with an increase to real estate taxes. And my finance committee discussed this, and while we are allowed to increase using the index to a maximum of 0.6982 mils, the finance committee asked me to present just a half mil increase, which is 0.5. And this slide showed you that with increasing it by 0.5 mils, it would bring you, with a 90% collection rate, which is our average collection rate, about $477,000. Those of you who are in finance, we had talked when we first looked at this slide, that was more around 500,000. So I wanted to let you know the difference in that, and this is good news for our taxpayers, is that the state has given us the amount for the Tax Reduction Act, which is the Homestead Farmstead. So those who own property and get a homestead reduction typically, in like last year, received $158. So the state has released the amount, and we are getting an additional, sorry, I lost track of my, lost track of my notes here. Sorry, we are getting an additional $358,286 over because of an increase in the gambling revenue that the state has received. So that comes to us. However, the school district does not get that as additional revenue. That has to be given back out to the taxpayers. So, that being said, we have about 9,500 taxpayers that receive the homestead and farmstead exemption. So this would amount to approximately about $37 as a reduction of their taxes, in addition to what they received in previous years. So those who received about $158 reduction would receive about $195 reduction. So if you're looking at a year to possibly raise taxes, it would be a good year, I'm thinking, because those who receive the homestead farmstead, it will have a less effect on the household because they're going to receive a $37 increase in the reduction of their taxes from the homestead farmstead. That doesn't affect all 20,000 taxpayers, however, it affects those who are have a homeowner that receive the homestead farmstead. Any questions? Okay, so this gives a 5-year financial impact if you increase your millage rate. So if we were to increase taxes, the 0.5, the half a mil, in this next year, 22-23, it shows you, if you look there where it says year 1, so every year forward, you're going to keep collecting that tax. That will be an additional revenue every year. And over the course of 5 years, it would be $2,385,000. However, if you increase year after year, and I did a projection just at increasing the half mil, over the course of 5 years, that compounds, and each year, you not only have your original, but then the next year's increase, and the next year's. And over 5 years, if you increase 0.5 mils each year, you could have additional revenue over 5 years of $7 million. When you're looking at possible decline of fund balance, this is one way that you can look at possibly helping the school district. My next slide shows an 11-year average of millage rates.
Sheree, just a quick comment / question on that last slide. If you can flip that back for me.
Sure can.
We talked about collection rates in the past, and obviously this is a bit of a extrapolation or a guessing game on collection rates. How accurate is that 90% collection rate at Connellsville School District?
That's very accurate. We've gone between 89.5 to like 91. Last school year we actually had almost 92% collection, but that's above average. We typically are around 89, 90, 91.
What does PASBO say for school districts in Pennsylvania?
In Pennsylvania, they're saying an average of 85%.
What?
85.
Yeah, so we're above the average, and we had concerns over COVID if it would actually go down. What happened?
It actually went up. So I don't know if it was because of stimulus money, that people actually used that stimulus money to pay their taxes, but I have tax collectors telling me they had people pay taxes that had never paid taxes to them in years, and all the years collected, and we brought in and we paid their taxes that year.
I think that shows, a lot about our community that we have such a high taxpayers rate and collection rate. So a lot of the work ethic of our community. Thank you.
So this is an 11-year average of millage rates throughout Fayette County. So this is just showing, and it looks purple on that screen, but on the printout it was pink. So the years that were increases are the colored, either pink or purple, whichever, if you're looking at the slide or the white paper. Those, you can see that over the last 11 years, we've increased taxes 2 years, in 14-15 and 15-16. However, we are by far the lowest millage rate in Fayette County, which is nice if you're buying a house, but the school district could, use some additional funds. We are, if we increase 0.5 mils, we will still be 0.8439 below out Gallatin, which is the next lowest. We will still be the lowest. And 3.4 mils below the average in Fayette County, the average of the schools in Fayette County. So just one more, address of, I don't think it's a bad idea to increase real estate taxes. Okay, so just some pointers. That this is not the final budget. We have the next month to make any changes. We have to approve a proposed final budget to adhere to the compliant impact on time. The proposed final budget has to be passed by May 31st. The proposed budget and all related documents after the passage will be on the website and available for public inspection at the administration building until the June 22nd, where hopefully we will adopt the final budget. But the final budget has to be passed by June 30th. We're still working on staffing. It's several reductions in staffing through attrition, which we've already budgeted those staffing reductions. So any changes that the board or anyone would make at this point will affect the budget that I have. So I've made all the reflections of the staff changes so far. We will have the teachers' bid meeting this Wednesday. So after that takes place, I will know what people moved, and I will adjust my budget accordingly because you have teachers paid at different rates, so I will adjust them to the correct buildings and positions where they will be, so that the athletic is more accurate for the final budget in June. Me, Jennifer, and Joe, Trixie will be looking at this budget over the course of the next month to go line by line. I will be sending lists out to all the building principals and department heads, printouts, asking them to make sure that they are verifying that the amounts we have budgeted, look correctly. Anything else they need to bring to my attention, anything else that they think they can cut, or any savings, cost savings they could fund us, we'll welcome those. So we'll continue to look at this over the course of next month. State revenues, just so you know, I know the governor proposed all these increases, and he's proposing that he's going to give us more money. However, as though and all the organizations said, you're better off reading more your history and where you normally get your budget for the state money. So that's where I've not increased that state funding, because I don't think that I would be surprised if it increased as much. We received just recently the insurance renewals from the workers' comp and our liability, and just to let you know that we've had a few claims over the past year or two. So in our package, which contains liability and school board legal insurances, there is an increase of $17,000 total for that. And the good news is our workers' comp, because we've had less and less claims, that has gone down $50,000. But in addition to that going down $50,000, because we have a successful safety committee, we will also get a 5% reduction on that as well, because we have a safety committee, and we do our due diligence and have our meetings every month and try to, make the changes necessary. And some more items just to discuss. in the staffing meetings and everything, FOLA, cyber program, we're trying to bring as much as we can into during the day. We want to provide a savings of those supplementals for the teachers who teach that outside of the regular day. However, I think the most important is that we're trying to provide a better service to our students by the teachers having the time scheduled in their regular day. Maybe they can better service the students. So just to let you know about the salary talk schedule. So we've rolled salaries forward with their contracts in mind and everything. So all the salaries have been increased to what the actual contracts are, what they actually will be paid, along with the benefits. The only unknown is the custodial maintenance contract because it's still under negotiations. So that has been rolled forward as is. Oh, whoops, I didn't mean to hit that. So one other item is that the health insurance increases. We did receive a 8% medical, a 3% to dental, and 3% for vision increases on those insurances this year. And the PSLRS rate has gone from 34.94 to 35.26, which is an increase of 0.32%. So those numbers just keep creeping up there. And then just one other item is that we have last year, or the current year's budget, the 21-22, we did have a contingency of $1.2 million budgeted. A lot of that was because the ARPS, the application wasn't even available, so we didn't know how to budget for that in this current year. So a lot of that was for our ESSER and other grants. However, I'm decreasing the contingency to $400,000 because we now know a lot of the budget for a lot of those grants. However, don't know if any other smaller grants may come available. We also don't know if there's any unexpected possible increases in wages or any changes that might be made. And then just any other related costs, with legal fees or anything that is, unknown. So, those are the items that are on the slide. I did have a few other items. I gave the board members a single sheet that it says summary of proposed budget items. I just kind of wanted to go over these items. We're done with the slide. So I know I was asked in my finance committee to explain the difference between the 2021 year budget and the 21-22. They wanted clarification as to why that budget increased $3 million. So I answered that question on this page. So the two sections of the budget that make up the majority of the difference. I mean, obviously salaries and benefits go up every year, but the major places where I showed a difference is the $1.2 million that was the contingency budget. The prior year we didn't have that. And then the other makes up the special education, which was an increase of $500,000 in salaries and benefits for additional staffing, and then purchase services, which was nursing services and additional chestnut counseling services, and then also a $1 million increase in student tuition paid for students that were in placements. Some of those examples are Highlands, Marquis. There's a long list of outside placements that we do that service our special education students. And then just to overlook, just a brief, the main changes for the 22-23 versus 21-22. The main change to next year's budget, there's an increase in curriculum by $650,000, which is a purchase for ELA curriculum, and we're purchasing that using ESSER funds. And then also professional services are increasing $570,000 for services being provided using ESSER funds. There's an increase of $400,000 due to the increase of health insurance, an additional $200,000 for PSLRS increase. we added 500,000 expenditure to transfer money to capital reserves. So my recommendation on that increase of the taxes would equal the amount we could put to capital reserve. We've depleted our regular capital reserve accounts to under 200,000, and I feel like we need to try to build that back up. So while this year we have the ESSER money, I feel like that tax increase, we should reserve that for and place that into the capital reserve account to try to build that up, because we do know that our buildings, you know, down the road, they do now, and they'll continue to need, you know, some more, and we will need money for that. And then that 500,000 in transfer to capital reserve also, I feel, is dependent upon whether or not we do raise taxes. I don't know that we have that much excess in our budget to make that transfer if we do not raise taxes. And then I did decrease, what I told you, the contingency. And then I also just gave you more of a description of the homestead farmstead and that money that we are going to receive that we can distribute out to our taxpayers on there as well. And then I just wanted to give you the CTC budget. I didn't touch on that today in my presentation. However, it's in your detailed budget book. The last section is a summary and a detailed printout of their budget. So the Career Center's budget is $4,531,589. That budget is both their revenue and their expenditures. They always have a budgeted a balanced budget, and basically that is because the district offsets their budget. So we see what their expenditures are, and then their revenue, if they get state funding, and they have a little bit of local funding from a few grants, and then they get the cosmetology and the culinary arts money. However, $3,072,270 is the amount that is in the budget is charged back to the district as a tuition cost. So when you look at the school district's tuition cost, that is part of that 500s. That's part of that tuition cost, is to pay towards the tuition. I mean, what it costs to have our students and educate our students at this CTC. So I just kind of wanted to explain that a little bit as to, you know, how that works between the two budgets, since the district owns the CTC, therefore it would be fully fund whatever the needs are through the district's budget for the CTC. Okay, and then I open up to any questions. Mm-hmm. Peasers would be part of the benefits. Peasers is a benefit cost, yes. I do not, however, I could break that down and send that out in an email or have it ready for next week. Absolutely, I can break that down. I can run a report and give that specifically to you.
For 60% salary.
Absolutely. I don't have that with me. Yeah, I know we were just under 200,000 and we approved 358,000, so, you know, just over 500,000, but I don't have an exact number with me. A little over 5.
Anybody in the audience have any questions?
And this will then be on the agenda for, not for tonight, because I'll give you time to digest all the information. We'll have this on the agenda for next week's meeting to approve the proposed final budget. Okay?